What's going on, everybody? It's life and relationship expert Cheyenne Bostock, also known as Ask Shy B. You're hanging out with the Sales Podcast with Wes Schaefer.
Welcome to the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. This is where ordinary entrepreneurs come for inspiration and education to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes until the job gets done. Look, when I made the leap from corporate America to running my own business, I had a wife, 5 kids, a mortgage, and they all wanted to eat and sleep in warm beds. I didn't have the luxury of hitting rock bottom while I found myself on my buddy's couch or in somebody's basement or going back home. Oh no. I had to put food on the table, a lot of food on the table, every single day, every week, every month. This is the no hype, cut to the chase material, ideas, and training I wish I had when I started down my entrepreneurial journey. This is one of the premier sales, marketing, and entrepreneurial programs available, and it's free. Make sure to stay up to date on everything I'm working on, along with additional content I don't have time to share on the podcast by signing up for the Weekly Whisper at weeklywhisper.com. If you're curious about where to start when it comes to taking control of your sales and marketing is just selling in print, you can get my sales agenda to use in your everyday sales life at thesalesagenda.com. Finally, get the on-demand help you need to grow your sales at 30daysalesgrowth.com. Enter the promo code podcast to save a few bucks on your order. If you have any questions on ways I might be able to help you here with my team at The Sales Whisperer, feel free to email me, wes@thesaleswhisperer.com. That is my actual email address. Now on to the show. Steve Chou, the manliest man that sells linens online. Welcome to The Sales Podcast. How are you?
Good, man. Actually, it's lace handkerchiefs.
Oh, so you're even
Can't get more
manly.
than that. There you go.
Lace handkerchiefs. All right. Well, you will have to explain this over the course of the next few minutes. So thanks for coming on. I just got to meet you through our mutual friend, Miss Natalie Sasson. She's been on the show, Suitcase Entrepreneur, in our little mastermind group and getting to know you. And I love your story. I love what you're doing online. That's why I wanted to have you on. And the fact, too, and like I just said before I turned the recorder on, it's like, I don't want to ask this question until I'm recording. Kind of like golf, right? You don't want to use up all your good shots in the driving range. You gotta save some for the competition. So can you walk people through, because you've got a great business now with your wife, and I want to hear more about that and how you started, how you monetized it. But I had a guy on last week, and now you still have a day job, right? And you're still making things work in the entrepreneurial online world. So before we get into your online business, can you talk to us how you were able to juggle everything to make this happen?
Yeah, so all of the online things that I do are pretty scalable and actually don't require all that much time. So I would estimate between 8 to 10 hours I spend on all the online stuff.
Okay.
And just recently I dropped down to 4 days at my day job, which gives me an extra day to actually work on the other stuff. So it really isn't that much of a stretch from a time perspective.
Right.
And that's how I'm able to just do everything. Like the computers handle most of the stuff.
Right. So walk us through your story. So your website that you talk about your story is mywifequitherjob.com, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But was this her own business? She had linens and handkerchief. What was this? I can't even say the word. I'm too manly to even talk about silk linens. But so this was her own business or a hobby, or what was it?
I'll give like the really quick summary of how it all got started. Basically, when my wife and I got engaged to be married, actually, when we first started dating, she told me that she was going to quit her job as soon as she became pregnant with our first child. And so we live in an area that's really expensive. And if you want a good house in a good school district, you pretty much have to have 2 incomes, right? Mm-hmm. So that day finally came. She became pregnant, and she told me that she was going to quit. And so that's when we started scrambling because we wanted another income source. I wasn't really willing to reduce my lifestyle in any way. And so we started looking at different businesses that we could run. We kind of stumbled upon e-commerce and selling stuff online. And that's how we kind of started that first e-commerce store at bumblebeelinens.com. Now, you were mentioning that selling handkerchiefs, it's a little random, right? But the reason we stumbled upon that was because when we got married, we spent a lot of money on photography. And my wife didn't want to be seen in photos crying with just these nasty little tissues. So we looked all over the place for handkerchiefs, could not find any anywhere. Finally, we found this place in China, but you had to buy like hundreds, right? And so we bought hundreds of these online. We used maybe like 6 of them, sold the rest on eBay, and then they sold like hotcakes. So that's how it got started.
Very nice. You kind of stumbled across it. That was a good word. Stumbled across e-commerce and selling handkerchiefs. All right. Very nice. All right. So there you are. So you're selling. So you actually ordered like several hundred handkerchiefs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the minimum, it was like one of those manufacturers, right? So you had to get a whole bunch. I think we ordered like almost 300 to start.
You couldn't find like a little old lady with a sewing machine like in the retirement community to make like 3?
You know, that would have been smarter, Wes, but I'm glad I didn't listen to you way back then.
Good thing you didn't, huh? So you're sitting with these, and had you ever done anything on eBay before?
No, we started on eBay before. I used to sell my old junk,
right?
And we were just trying to liquidate these things in the beginning. That's all we were trying to do. But they ended up just selling really quick, faster than any other auction I had put up. And
did you set a price? Did you do a $1 bid or what?
No, we just set it at the lowest thing and just let them ride.
So you said like a 1 penny or a $1 and just whatever they sold, they sold?
$1 and just let them ride, yeah, essentially.
Like a 3-day auction, 5-day auction?
10-day auction, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And were you selling like one at a time or like a dozen at a time?
We were selling them in sets of 3 and then later a dozen since we were just trying to get rid of them.
Right, just trying to figure it out. And how much were they selling for?
It depends. Like sets of 3 were on the order of $20 or so.
Wow.
So not too many, not too much money.
Well, but you paid what, 50 cents or a dollar for them?
Oh, yeah. Back in the day, it was like
so when was
a dozen or something. This was back in 2007.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, then the economy collapsed, so then they probably only sold for like $15, right?
What's funny is it's the wedding industry, right? The economy
always
never
going
collapses. Yeah, exactly. So
very nice. All right. So you stumble across this. Now the baby is still, you got a bun in the oven, right? So you got 9 months, period.
Yeah.
So were you like, how do we turn this into a business, or did walk us through that?
We got married in 2003. It had been a good 3 or 4 years since we had done this eBay thing, and so we actually got back in touch with that vendor because we were like, hey, why don't we sell those handkerchiefs? They did really well on eBay. Why don't we just throw up an online store? And so we got back in touch with that vendor, placed our first bulk order, and then just kind of threw up the store. A lot of random things came together, actually.
Okay.
One of my buddies decided to start a photography store, and he started his own shopping cart website. And I was like, wow, how did you throw that up so quick? And he told me that all the stuff was already written for you. And so I kind of followed his footsteps and launched my store that way. Back in the day, there weren't all these platforms. There weren't like the Shopifys, the big commerces. So you had to pretty much do everything from scratch.
Right.
And so I just kind of stumbled upon this and then threw up the store and then started making sales.
Right. Okay. So the first time you did this was 2003 when
That's
you got
correct.
married. So then y'all didn't do anything. So in 2007, you get pregnant and you're like, let's go back to selling handkerchiefs.
Well, yeah, I mean, we needed some income, right? And we had some other ideas too. They didn't pan out. Ultimately, it was this online store idea that worked.
Right. That still seems like a big risk. I mean, making $20 sales to replace a high-figure salary in Southern California, I mean, that's still a big leap.
It's not a big risk because we pretty much invested like $600 to start this whole thing.
Right.
And then worst case scenario, my wife would have worked a little bit longer.
Okay.
Or even worst case scenario, would have just cut back dramatically, stopped going out to eat, entertainment expenses, and that sort of thing. So in that respect, it wasn't that risky.
Right. Okay. Because, I mean, I met your butler and your 3 nannies. I mean, you don't want to cut them, and your massage therapist is wonderful. I mean, good grief. The mani-pedis, you cannot cut that. I mean, it helps you relax, become one with the world, right? All right, so you're doing this in 2007, and then how quickly did you replace your income?
We did it in a year, actually. Yeah, so things started out really slow, and a couple of other magical things happened along the way. My brother-in-law just happened to be working on Google AdWords. Mm-hmm. You know, he worked at Google. And he was like, hey, did you know that you could just bring instant traffic to your website by paying for these keywords, right? And so it's like, here's some documentation. Why don't you go through and read it? And so I read through it, and I started running ads.
Right.
And those pretty much brought instant sales right away.
Right.
We were also creating content on a regular basis back then. I had my wife write these craft tutorials and wedding sort of articles to kind of rank in the search engines. And then the third prong to that attack was we went out and we actually contacted wedding and event planners to see if, any of their clients wanted our stuff. So it was the combination of those three things that allowed us to hit six figures in that first year.
Now, was your wife a natural writer, or did she kind of struggle at it and self-teach, or what?
So she's not a good writer, but she's very, very crafty.
Okay.
So that's why a lot of the content on that site is in the forms of crafts, do-it-yourself type of projects that brides can do for their wedding. And then I kind of did a lot of the writing, and I had to put on like my female hat and write from a more feminine perspective, but
Because aren't you like some type of Stanford engineer or something?
I am an engineer. That's correct. That's my day job. I'm a hardware engineer, and I hate writing. I actually hate writing, but it's just something you got to do what you got to do, right? So,
are you like Mel Gibson? Do you put the pantyhose on your head and the lipstick and wrap yourself, like make pirate hats out of the handkerchiefs, and then you kind of play some what's the woman? Play some Celine Dion and start.
Wes, it's really funny because I used to go on these wedding forums. And I used to play a female. My persona on there was Christina Lang, newly engaged, and I used to get all cheerful and bubbly and try to sell these things. So I know you got it in you too, Wes. It's all fun. But
I do. I hate to admit it, but great salespeople have great empathy, right? I talk about that in my training. And empathy is being able to walk a mile in their shoes, right? Being able to picture what's going on in their world. Dudes can write about handkerchiefs. I mean, you got to enter their world, and people are people, right? I mean, social media, all this, it's kind of changed, but the human nature hasn't changed. And you're married, right? And I assume you have a mother. You probably have some cousins and others that are women. So I mean, it's not like you haven't been exposed to women and what they talk about and what they deal with. If you can survive a wedding, the planning of a wedding, then...
Oh, yeah. It's all downhill from there.
Oh, yeah. Piece of cake. Yeah. I always say, get engaged and drive cross country. If you can drive cross country and back and still be engaged, then it's meant to be. All right. So within a year, you make this happen. And so that's all good. But then you're like, hey, wait a minute. I can teach people how to do this and probably make more money. I mean, what made you make that transition?
That didn't quite happen the way you just said, actually. So what ended up happening was a bunch of my friends started having kids, right? Like you all start having kids at the same time, around the same time. And so they started asking us, they wanted to do the same thing. And so we would have these dinner dates, and I would be just talking about our linens business the whole time. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to put all this stuff down on a website. And then I did that for a while, actually. Let's see, end of 2008, early 2009 was when I launched My Wife Quit Her Job. And then within a couple years, things started getting indexed. I started gathering a following of people who were interested in this stuff. And then people started asking me for a training class. But up until that point, I was just making money off the blog, just off of AdSense and affiliate revenue and that sort of thing.
Right.
And I didn't actually want to launch a training class. I wasn't really interested in that at the time, but people were just offering to send me money. And you know how that is, Wes. So I ended up...
Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to put that in my pocket real quick. That's why I keep my window open. People just throw money in my window.
I know. That's why I like you so much. People are whispering in your ear, right? So I ended up launching this class with no content in it, just threw a webinar up, saying this is what I was going to teach. 100 people showed up. I ended up selling 35 seats for $299 just that one day. And then I was like, wow, you can actually make money doing this stuff, right?
Right.
And then
that was just on the promise that you would teach them.
That's correct. Okay. Just the promise.
Very cool. I always say, sell it first, then build the product, right?
Yeah, but the problem was then I had to deliver. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't know where you live, I mean, you could just go into the name Christina Lang and they would never really find you.
That's true. But yeah, so that class started growing. I started putting content into it on a regular basis, and I've been running that this is my 4th year doing that.
Okay.
And so there's like 4 years worth of content in there over time.
Right. And are you getting down to the nitty gritty with people on, SEO and formatting a storefront and images and keyword tagging and all that kind of fun
it's
stuff?
all about the nitty gritty.
Okay.
Yeah, like the trenches stuff. And since I'm kind of technical, I can actually dig really, really deep until, on how all the tools work and all the strategies and that sort of thing.
And this is for who? Would you say anybody wanting to run an e-commerce store?
Anyone wanting to launch an e-commerce store or who has their own existing e-commerce store.
Right.
I kind of treat my own e-commerce store as kind of a lab. So I try all these different strategies on it, see what works, and then I kind of report it to the students in the class.
Right. Now, is that dangerous? I mean, you have an existing business now making good money. So when you say a lab, it's a very controlled, conservative lab, I would assume, or you sometimes break in your site?
No, well, yeah, sometimes I break my site, but I'm pretty thorough. Like I do this for a living, right? Development stuff. So when I say lab, it's mainly in trying new marketing tactics, not necessarily changing the source code, right? So for example, recently I wrote a post on Facebook dynamic retargeting for e-commerce. That's just something that you just kind of run and tack onto your site, right? It's not like you're changing the underlying structure.
Sure. So you've been doing this now 8 years, right?
Yeah.
Things aren't so easy anymore. Would you agree?
Things in what respect?
It seems more competitive. It seems more convoluted. I mean, it seems like prices are going up. Google's not just giving this stuff away anymore. Facebook's entered the fray. Now Facebook's slowly raising their prices. So, I mean, it's like in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder, right?
So I can say that some of the old tactics are harder, but there's always new things propping up, right? So, for example, while Facebook and all those pay-per-click platforms are getting more expensive, new things have popped up like Pinterest, for example, which is still very cheap.
Right.
Instagram, all these guys are starting to get into the ad mix as well. And so as things become more competitive, new things pop up. And so that's why you have to be constantly evolving your business to stay on top.
Right. And that's kind of bittersweet, right? Because on the one hand, you can't just sit on your haunches. But on the flip side, your competition probably is. So as long as you're moving ahead, you can stay ahead, right?
Yeah, totally. It's like that with any business.
So how long do you foresee doing this versus it like becoming a grind? You're like, oh, never mind. Or like, has this become kind of your passion now?
So the e-commerce store is actually run by my wife, and we have a couple of employees that do most of the heavy lifting, packing and placing orders and that sort of thing. So my wife kind of focuses on the marketing, and that's kind of what interests her.
Okay.
For myself, I just enjoy building an audience and getting out there. So I don't really foresee myself getting really sick of this. And if I did, I'd probably outsource a lot of the stuff.
And just still own it.
And still own it, yeah.
And so I know some people will listen, oh, it must be nice having a job. You can just take a day off, man. But, I mean, you did this for 7 years, right, with a full-time job.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then only recently you cut back 1 day, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Who did I had somebody on, now it's going to kill me. They bought back a day of their job. They did the same thing. So they had more time. So, but so when we had to work 5 days a week. I mean, so the baby was born. So, I mean, you had a baby, right, for 6.5 of those 7 years before you.
Yeah. Now we got 2 babies. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, how did you juggle that? I mean, a lot of late nights. Were you missing all the family things, or are you just very efficient?
No. So, my wife was running our store full time, right? And it could be done from our house.
Right.
So it was still a lot of work, but it was like time shifted work, right? She could do everything after the kids went to bed, for example, right?
Cool.
For myself, the blog, prior to me starting my podcast, it was actually pretty cush. We're talking like 5 hours a week to pump out an article.
Okay.
So not that bad at all.
Right. And then since doing handkerchiefs doesn't really compete with hardware design, I mean, your company probably doesn't even care, huh?
They don't care. And actually, my boss knows what I do. And he says, as long as I get my stuff done, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially it's non-competitive. So most companies won't have a problem. And I mean, what do you say though to people that it might be a conflict? Do you get into coaching with people on that, or do you stick strictly with the marketing and the guts of marketing and e-commerce?
You mean if they want to do this while working a full-time job, you mean?
Yeah. Do you ever get into kind of business consulting, coaching to help them make that transition?
What's tough about those things is that they require your physical time, right? So for my businesses, I've always focused on stuff that's scalable.
Yep.
So the way I sell my course today is I have this email autoresponder sequence. When people sign on, there's essentially 30 emails that go out to them automatically that sell to them.
Right.
And I've recorded videos and that sort of thing. Everything that I do tends to be a little bit more automated, so I can spend more time on family and that sort of thing without sacrificing my time. Consulting does not fall under that.
Right.
So
how did you figure this whole 30-day sequence? Because, I mean, that's something that anybody can do, right? I mean, people know I do a lot of work with with Infusionsoft, big green book back there. But, I mean, I also resell Aweber. You can start for $1. You can start on MailChimp for free and up to 2,500 contacts, I think. And they have autoresponders, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, how can somebody... Do you have any tips or tricks for how they can get into that mindset and start thinking sequential? Because so many people, they hate the man, right? I hate working for the man. But in reality, most of us got started working for the man,
Oh, yeah.
And so I want people to really appreciate what they have while they have it, but think processes and whatnot. So how did you learn that? I mean, going from, again, engineering and handkerchiefs to a 30-day sequence, and that's just to make the sale, right? This is for somebody that opts in for free.
Yeah.
So you haven't made a nickel yet, and you've created 30 separate lessons. I mean, walk us through that mind shift. And
so let me tell you this, Wes. I'm an engineer, man. You know what I do for a living? I stare at a screen all day, right? So it was really hard for me to actually... become a salesman, essentially.
Okay.
And so I would say that the book that really changed my entire mindset was this book by Cialdini, The Art of Persuasion, right? Really great book.
Yep.
And so when I was crafting this 30-day email sequence to sell, I essentially just went down all of those arts of persuasion, right?
Yep.
So I can just give you a very high-level overview of that sequence. The first part of the sequence just kind of introduces who I am, and so I put out a video for this, basically telling my story and giving a very high-level overview about e-commerce and how it can benefit your life. And then the next 8 steps or so kind of gives a very in-depth tutorial on how to launch an e-commerce store, assuming you know what you want to sell. That's very detailed, just to give an idea of what my teaching style is. And then the remaining 20 is all about the psychological stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so the first step was reciprocity. So I gave a tutorial, and then whoever's on the receiving end kind of feels indebted in a way. I started tapping into a lot of emotional factors. Like I started writing stories about missing out on an opportunity. So I'll give you just a quick example here. When my wife and I first started dating, it actually took me a long time to ask her out. We actually met on a lot of occasions, but I was just too chicken to ask her out. And actually 6 months had passed, and she had all these dates lined up. And finally, when I got the guts to ask her out, she ended up having to cancel all those other ones after our first date. But I was this close to just not.
She had all these dates. What do you mean all these dates? She just had breakfast, lunch, dinner, just lined up?
She had these. This is what she told me. I don't know if it's true. All right, but
you want me to call
told
her?
Me she had,
I'll interview her. I'll interview her next. I'll get you the truth.
Yes, get me the truth. Could be just a crock, but
I want the truth.
Her friends were setting her up and stuff, and so I almost missed out on that. And so I kind of drew the analogy with my businesses, with that story. Just the fear of missing out on an opportunity that has grown. I talk about all these other. I do a lot of storytelling in these sequences to just kind of trigger certain emotional responses, and I make analogies to real life stories that I've had. Yep. And so that's basically. Oh, I also have a lot of testimonials from students in the class. Right. Real people with real shops making real money with their online stores.
So I'm gonna come back to testimonials. I just wrote that down.
Okay.
But let me ask you. You start making these videos. So you called NBC, right? And you got those big $high cameras. You did the A, B, even C shots, right? Lighting and green screen and flares and fire and dragons and stuff, right?
I've been using the same camera that I'm using for this interview, actually. So I figure if it's good enough for you, Wes, it's good enough for me.
Damn Skippy, baby. This is the sales podcast. So what do you have? Is it a webcam? What is it?
Just a Logitech HD webcam. That's all it is.
There you go. Very nice.
And I do screencast too, right? And so really it's my screen, and I have my face in like the lower right-hand corner.
Yep.
So
I do those all the time. $97 screen flow on my Mac.
Yeah.
And I got the same. I got a Logitech. I can't even see the model. But I've had this Logitech for probably 5 years.
Yeah.
Bought it at Sam's Club. I think they still sell it for like $60. Mm-hmm. There you go. All right. So I just want to make sure nobody had any excuse that they don't have an expensive camera or a camera crew to come make their videos. Right?
I do not. I mean, my kids aren't old enough yet. I mean, the hope is once they grow up, I can have an Insta camera crew. But for now.
There you go.
Yep.
So as you talk about testimonials, so again, that's kind of the chicken and the egg, right? You don't have testimonials for your great course until you have a great course. So how'd you launch this great course without testimonials?
So as I mentioned before, I launched the course with just a webinar, right?
Yep.
And at that point,
and who'd you invite to the webinar?
People on my list who were subscribers to my blog.
Okay.
I didn't have this email autoresponder sequence back then.
Okay.
And I got testimonials from this first group of 35.
Okay.
And I've been gathering email addresses for that blog for quite a while, and my lead magnet at that point was just an ebook.
Okay.
And so that's how I got people interested. I got my first 35 customers. Several of those, a bunch of those became successful, and I got testimonials from those people. And then I slowly kind of grew out that autoresponder sequence based on testimonials and other things. One thing that I did also do was I broke apart that ebook into different steps of the email autoresponder sequence.
Okay.
The reason I did that was because with the ebook, I was noticing that people weren't clicking on the links inside the ebook. And so I started questioning altogether whether people were just downloading this thing and not reading it at all.
Which is true for most people, most things.
Yeah. And so once I broke that book down, I started seeing a lot more clicks to my affiliate links, a lot more clicks to just articles that I was pointing to.
Yep.
And so it did two things, I think. One, it made people more likely to open my emails because there was a sequence and there's kind of like a cliffhanger between each one.
Yep.
And people weren't just tucking their ebooks away and never to be read.
Now, is this 1 day apart, the emails?
The first sequence of 9 is 1 day apart.
Okay. And then you spread it out a couple days?
After that, it's around 2 a week that I send out.
Oh, wow. So that 30-step sequence takes almost a year, right? Or half a year.
No, it doesn't take that long.
Well, the first 9, so you have 21, so that's 22 and a half weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
Almost half a year.
So maybe it's not, maybe like the first, it ends up not being that much. I think it's after step 15 is when it goes 2 a week, actually.
Okay.
Prior to then, it's like 1 or 2 days apart.
Now, so why do you spread it apart? I mean, if they're used to hearing from you, did you test that, or was it a gut feel?
Yeah, so I was just basing that on open percentages.
Okay.
And so I kind of found that after a certain while, the open percentages starting trailing off a little bit.
Right.
And so by spacing them apart a little bit, the open percentages started to improve.
Gotcha.
It's not entirely scientific. I only tried, a certain set of sequences, but I also talked to some of my buddies who do this also. And the reason why I did that is after that first 9-step sequence, that's the tutorial part. People want those every day. Mm-hmm. After that, they slowly become disengaged, and so the number of unsubscribes that you might get will tend to increase if you keep that everyday sending frequency. But again, there's so many factors in play, right? It depends on the quality of your emails, how interested they are in the stuff that you're sending out. So really depends on what you're putting out.
Well, if you'd apply a Gaussian distribution across multiple axes and divide by Avogadro's number and multiply by pi, you will know exactly how many to send. I'm just, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Man. I just don't have the mathematical background to fathom such an algorithm, Wes.
I got a little time after this. I'll type something up real quick, because I like you. So, I mean, it's what I do. So are you noticing, are people buying on the 30th email?
Some people buy on the 30th email. Yes, it has happened.
Okay.
But I would say the bulk of the sales happen within the first 11 steps.
Okay. And are you telling people that they're signing up for a 30-day, series?
I do not. I do not.
Say sign up for some info.
I'm telling them that they're signing up for a 6-day mini course.
Okay.
And the first 6 days, it comes every day, and it actually teaches something. And what's funny about it, it's not a cheap class, right? It's at $1,000 right now. And so sometimes it takes time for people to decide to actually make that purchase, right?
Right.
And so by just keeping in contact with them week after week, it kind of wears them down a little bit, or it keeps the mind share going, so that when they, a lot of times it just takes,
wear them down in a bad way.
That's the wrong
right?
term.
You kind of like breaking down their resistance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The sales whisperer would naturally have a better term for this.
There you go, babe. That's how I work. Okay.
But sometimes it's just that one story that triggers some sort of emotional response, and then they just go out and buy. You never know what's going to happen. So.
Right. So, all right. So they know they're getting 6. So at the 6, are you saying, hey, I got some bonuses, stay tuned?
No, I don't do that. So after the 6th, I start sending a bunch of supplemental resources, right?
Okay.
Like online products and whatever that I recommend that I use in my own business. Mm-hmm. I send out this ultimate small business startup guide on how to incorporate and all the different things to get rid of the red tape when you're starting.
So you're not like trying to make a sale. You're trying to build value to them so they see you as a trusted resource.
That's correct.
Okay.
Of that first 9 sequence email, I think I only have one email on that actually does selling.
Okay.
Rest of it is just more subtle selling. Like in the PS, for example, I might say, hey, are you interested in learning about this stuff? If so, click here to check it out.
Yep. Cool.
And I would say the remaining elements of the sequence is not a hard sell either.
Right.
Just very subtle selling.
Right. So, I mean, over time, obviously you're becoming a good salesperson. You're becoming a good marketer, right? But I mean, did you consciously, have you been studying this like Cialdini or have you kind of run with a gut feel just as you run the business and get feedback? I mean, how have you honed your craft?
It's a combination of things. I'm in a couple of mastermind groups of people that just do this for a living. I read books. I figure out what works and what doesn't just by changing around. What I really like about all this is that just different words or different phrases can have a dramatically different effect.
Yes.
It's not like engineering in any way, right? In engineering, there's always an absolute answer to something that works. Whereas in this case, it's like psychology and how humans behave. It's really interesting to me.
Right.
So it's a lot of times it's trial and error.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, and so I'm glad that you mentioned that. So I mean, you're not just hoping though. I mean, you're applying and testing.
Yeah.
But I would argue that it is very scientific. I mean, people are very predictable, and once you understand, examples I'll always give is if you walked out to your mailbox right now and there was a check for $10,000, from Amazon or something, right? Oh, we miscalculated your book sales over the last 5 years, and here's your check. You'd probably be happy, right? And as you were walking home, from your mailbox, if I drove up with a hot cup of coffee and threw it in your face, you'd probably be upset, right?
These are very good insights, Wes. Yeah.
I mean, so those are big ranges, right? But like an example I always use with people, like if I own a furniture store and you come just walking in on a Saturday and I walk up to you and I say, hey, how can I help you? What will you say 99 times out of 100?
Not interested. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just looking.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, that's a more subtle, right, more realistic example. But I mean, those things are very scientific,
What's funny though, Wes, is like I belong to a lot of email lists where they do just hard sell after hard sell after hard sell.
Yep.
And it just makes me wonder because clearly this works. Otherwise, people wouldn't be doing it that way, right?
Right.
So that's why it's always unclear to me. Like the way I do it is just it more suits my personality. And so
I'm not saying do the hard sell. I'm not a hard seller either.
Okay.
But I'm saying a headline, whether it's bold or red or all those little things do matter. So everything you're testing, whether you do 7 emails in your series or 37, there is psychology there, that there are definitive things you can measure and test that help. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to tug on somebody's emotions and their heartstrings, right? And elicit that response. You're like, yes, this is what I need. I'm going to give this guy my money. That's a little esoteric, but the steps to get them there, I think, are really very finite.
So here's the thing. I feel that people who like you as a person are just more likely to buy, irrespective of the material that you're putting out to a certain extent. Would you say that?
Absolutely. And and I've got a whole course on selling by personality type. And I took the same course, I just took the name and kind of made it my own. But there's a guy, Dr. Grant, that does a lot with discs and and Myers-Briggs type. There are some, like you meet somebody and you just meet them in a bar, right? Or you meet them at a game and you're like, this is my long lost brother. Where have you been my whole life, right? You just hit it off. So you have the same personality types. So you're going to sell to those people, no problem, okay? But there's about a quarter of the population, rough estimates, 25%, and it's a little different. But another quarter, it won't be hard to get along, but half of the population will not naturally like or want to buy from you. And it's those that really we're trying to connect with to really bump the numbers because that's where the money is, really. Well, the easy money is the low-hanging fruit. Make sure the people that absolutely love you are giving you all their money.
Right.
So that's the obvious. But then on those, as you start to get away from that at 25%, you widen that pie. You got to, definitely dial it in. And it's different language. They're more analytical, although you're kind of unique, right? You're an engineer, so you skew to that analytical, slow, deliberate, methodical type, but you're a great example of somebody can be analytical in their day job, but maybe very outgoing and quick decision maker in your hobbies or your passion.
I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, right? Just like the measuring what works, but it is kind of fuzzy, right? Like when I put out a story, like a personal story, I really don't know exactly how it's going to affect the people that are reading it.
Right.
And so it's a matter of just seeing the response, the click-through rates, and that sort of thing to see whether it's working, or the signups, right?
But you can put out a personal story and fill it with a lot of technical specs and tests and models and charts, and so you can talk to both.
Yeah, no, totally.
So very nice. How do we get off on that, man?
I have no idea.
Things you do.
You're the monitor, man.
Good grief! I can't take you anywhere, man. All right, so the main thing is, and it's always my answer too at marketing. Hey, what should I do? And it's like, well, it depends. Right. So I mean, the cool thing is you're not just leaving things up to chance. You're willing to tinker and test and expand, right? And so your program now is $1,000. So when we first spoke, maybe a month or so ago, you did a little test. Are you cool talking about your little experiment with raising your prices?
Oh yeah. Actually, I have no problems talking about that because I've been raising prices twice a year for since I started the thing. So
nice. Yeah. Because you started at $299, now you're at $1,000. So obviously people know you've raised your prices.
Yeah, totally.
And is that why? Just because you want to make as much money as possible? You want to maybe get to the point where nobody will buy it so you can go do something else? I mean, how do you know it's time to raise your price?
Yeah, the rationale for that is I'm constantly putting out content into this class on a weekly basis. Oh, wow. And so I sincerely believe that the value is constantly increasing. Okay. And so every time I reach a certain content threshold, I increase the price. And I know just based on some of my colleagues and what they're pricing their classes at, I haven't hit the ceiling in terms of what I'm offering. Okay. So I actually think I'm still underpriced. I'm just taking a gradual way to make it up to what I think the true value is.
How do you create something that's not overwhelming, though? Because, I mean, we've all enrolled in programs, and you log in, I'm going to get started, and you go, oh, my gosh, you scroll through, 12 miles of stuff, and you go, never mind, just keep my money. I can't get through all that content.
So e-commerce is a really complex problem, right? Or a complex business. So there's a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different factors depending on what you sell.
Okay.
So the way the course is structured, the first part is just figuring out what you want to sell. And that's actually a section that everyone needs to go through. Likewise with product sourcing, finding to actually obtain the product from a vendor, that's something that I have everyone go through as well.
Okay.
But after that, it's up to you.
Okay.
I have these suggested flows on what you should try to get customers into the store. But again, it's going to depend.
Okay.
And one reason why my return rate is so low is because I actually hold weekly office hours live, just like on a webinar, where people can ask me questions in real time, questions that are very specific to their business that I can answer.
Okay.
And the reason I do that is because I feel like with any business, there's always going to be very specific things that need to be addressed on a very personal level. And so it's just a combination of those things.
How do you make yourself accessible? Through a chat or a Facebook or what?
Yeah, so I have this live chat that I set up, and then it's just a Google Hangout. And so people type in their questions via chat, and I just respond over the video.
Oh, you do. So you answer their questions.
Yeah, right there.
Audible and video.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. You have a day job, so you just do this in the evenings or the mornings or what?
Yeah, it's just Wednesday nights are my evening, just once a week.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, once a week. That's good stuff. Very nice. And I've always said that. I mean, people want to have this, and it's so fun. Like Tim Ferriss, he even admits, he didn't make the name the 4-Hour Work Week, and I think it may have done as much damage as it has inspired people because I think it's unrealistic. He still works hard doing things. And I think people, they buy into community more than anything else. Wouldn't you say? I mean, it's nice knowing the stuff, but knowing that you're not alone, I think is what inspires people and keeps them going until they can finally reach their goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually facilitate focus groups, like little small groups where people get together, kind of like mini masterminds. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, you can't really do that, right? When you don't have a whole bunch of customers. But as the thing grows, you can have forums, you can have focus groups. There's a lot of different things that you can try.
So how do you stay inspired? I mean, every week coming up with new stuff? Is it just because you're naturally curious? Or I mean, this is your job, in a way, I guess, your second job. So you keep plodding away? I mean, because that...
Yeah, so I can answer that really easily. The e-commerce just moves so quickly. So there's always stuff that I'm doing. And the e-commerce store is still the top moneymaker in the household.
Okay.
Right? Lots of stuff to try there.
And are you just reading blogs, listening to other people? Like you hear something and maybe in your own mastermind group, you go, I'm going to go test that. And you test it and then teach it the next week?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things. Masterminds, reading blogs, just following up with the industry, talking to people.
Right.
It's a combination of all those things. And so I never run out of things to say. And in fact, I have a pretty decent Rolodex of other e-commerce entrepreneurs at this point. So I actually invite them to give talks on their expertise to my class, just as a favor, right? And I usually return the favor in different ways, whether it be to have them on the podcast or just mention them in one of my posts. So it's kind of like a win-win in a way.
Right.
And then I also have these random Q&A sessions, right? So where I don't actually even need to come up with anything. I just answer questions.
Yeah.
So I just mix it up.
Very cool.
Yep.
Well, man, any parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
I don't know, man. In terms of what? Give me a direction.
Man, we're trying to inspire people to go be you.
To go be me. What about yourself, Wes?
No way, man. That's easy. Just go sell something. It's all good. So I mean, what's some great wisdom maybe you have, or some phrase, something you were inspired that
I got something
you draw on repeatedly to keep you going?
After doing this for around 8 years, I can sincerely say this: you're never going to make life-changing money working for someone else, because your upside's always going to be limited. And so the only real way to make life-changing money is by going into business for yourself, and that usually means that you have to sell something. And so as long as you keep telling yourself that, you can hopefully convince yourself that your day job's not going to cut it. Start something on the side, and then eventually make some life-changing money.
You got to sell something. That's why I knew I had you
Dude,
on the
I
show
know
for
why
a
I was
reason.
on this podcast now.
Bam! Just reach right in, right to my heart, baby. Oh.
And don't shout. You got to whisper.
You took a little silk doily handkerchief. You just touched my heart with it right there, ever so slightly.
That'll be $20, Wes. I'll charge you later, man.
Hey, I'm gonna go buy 100 hankies. All right. All right. So everybody. So where do you want to send people? ProfitableOnlineStore.com?
Yeah, I'll send them to mywifequitterjob.com.
Okay.
And if you guys are getting married, any of you out there, I'll hook you up with some hankies if you want to go to bumblebeelinens.com. How's that?
Very nice. And all these will be linked in the show notes. All right, man. Steve Chou from I Made My Wife Quit Her Job Because I Wanted to Have a Butler. MyWifeQuitHerJob.com. Yeah, that was it. All right, man. Hey, thanks for coming on.
All right, dude. Thanks, Wes.
What a great example of blossoming where you are planted, right? The old story of acres of diamonds. They were literally, Steve and his wife were just living on top of acres of diamonds. They just had to see it, dig for it, and sell those things for millions. I don't know if they got millions yet, but they're probably getting close. And I love the fact, he and his wife are working together. He still has his day job. He likes his job. Now he's buying some time back. He won't stay there forever. I don't know. But it's not like corporate America is totally evil, right? If you like what you do, keep doing it, but still have multiple streams of income, right? These are things that give you freedom, that gives you options. We live in uncertain times, and there is no more job security anymore. So you have to create your own security, both financially, but also professionally, right? And with skills and what he has learned, he and his wife, those skills can be transferred into other businesses should they want to do something later on, or they can go full-time running their own business. So lots of things to learn there. Steve's a great guy. What you see is what you get. He's not phony at all. These are the kind of people I like having on the show. He's very transparent, very open. Sign up for his newsletter, sign up for his 6-step program, and see how he includes persuasion, how he gives a ton of value up front, and see what you can do to emulate that to grow your own business. Show feedback and guest suggestions are always welcome. Let me know what topics you'd like me to cover and any cool guys or gals you'd like me to interview. You can hit me up at wes@thesaleswhisperer.com. And if you want some affordable, live, interactive help from me and my team twice a month, check out marketingautomationnetwork.com. Even if you don't have an email or a CRM tool running yet, there is no other place on earth where you can get direct access to my team and me to answer your questions and record the answers and give you access to those sessions. You'll get access to the entire archive of sessions going back several years. So head on over to marketingautomationnetwork.com and sign up now. Remember to subscribe to the show, write me a review in iTunes, and I will love you long time. And please tell your friends, all right? The best compliment you can give is to share your feedback with a review and telling your friends about the show. And as always, remember to sell different.